it brings with it certain ethical codes, like non-harming others, not insulting, not backstabbing, not lying. So practicing the virtues is our response to the divine mind, because it's in me, it's in you, it's in him, it's in her. It's everywhere, it's in animals, it's in the clouds, the trees. It is the designer behind the universe. Stoics also developed complex physics. They tried to explain how the divine mind created the sun, the moon, the stars, the universe, the forces of physics. They were interested in physics, as were the Greeks. And they, for instance, what we call gravity was a sort of force of love for them. Things stick together because they love each other, to putting it in simple terms. And the key concept in Stoicism, ethically, was duty. Each of us has to perform our duty in proportion to our life schedule and our life situation. So if you used to be a mariner on the seas with the Norwegian shipping fleet, right? So your duty was to make sure the ships don't sink, they don't bash into other ships, they deliver their goods, the sailors don't die, of illnesses and so on. So you had certain duties as a mariner at that time. If you're a fireman, I've just watched a brilliant film about the French fire service, Pompiers Sapeurs, they call them. Brilliant movie, sort of fictional, set in Aude, southern France. But these guys have an incredible job because especially in the summer, there are forest fires deliberately set by arsonists. They also have to help if people commit suicide or there's a fight or a murder going on. It's them who are the frontline people that respond, not the police. And they then liaise, take people to hospital. And it was a really gripping insight into the life of being a fireman in France. Now, it's just a new film. Well, that's your duty as a fire person, to do all that stuff. You're trained to do it. You have medical knowledge and all kinds of technical knowledge. They showed also responding to a fire in a riot zone where people were throwing bottles and burning stuff at the firemen, But you do it, you do your duty. And this idea went down in the Hellenistic world. It became the favourite philosophy of Cleanthes and Chrysippus, who were heads of the Stoic school, Epictetus, who we have his texts, but also the emperor Marcus Aurelius. It was popular in Rome as well as Greece, and the emperor himself, who was one of the wisest emperors, wrote meditations about his duty as an emperor was to protect the empire, make it work, but not harm, injure, insult people, and to take. If somebody abuses you, he reflects on what you do about that. Well, they've got a problem, he says, get them some medical help or whatever. I mean, advanced stuff, and he plays a big role in the film Gladiator, which is one of the best films about the classical world, I think, made recently, where Marcus Aurelius, his death triggers the events that lead to the movie. Because his son, Commodus, was not a good man, was not trained in philosophy, but Marcus was. Seneca, who had the misfortune to be the philosopher in residence at the court of Emperor Nero, was also a great Stoic. Nero was the kind of anti-emperor who broke every single rule about good behaviour, and eventually had Seneca killed because he was annoyed at his advice. But he did his duty. Now, I've argued in my commentaries on the writings of St. Paul that St. Paul was partly trained in a Stoic school of philosophy. Because if you read St. Paul's letters, they are full of Stoicism. Even the metaphors he uses, he talks about we're all members of one body. We should look out for each other, and it doesn't matter what social class you're at, we're all important for the overall well-being of society. These are metaphors taken from Stoicism. And as I was researching for my commentary on Paul's letters, I discovered that Tarsus, where he was from, was a centre of Stoicism. It had a school of Stoicism at the time when young Paul was growing up there. And although he was Jewish and proud of his Jewish knowledge, he was also very interested in classical learning, and he spoke Greek, and I'm convinced that he studied in the Stoic school, which means that it got into Christianity through Paul. And that's why a lot of Christians, say in France in the 16th century, 17th century, they became revivers of Stoicism as a Christian philosophy, compatible with the best aspects of Christianity. The other thing the Stoics did is they integrated Aristotle and Plato and said, well, these were proto-Stoics, they're part of our school too. So great stuff, really. And there are, I don't know, I reckon there are maybe about 5 million people in the world today either studying classical philosophy or teaching it, or who use some of its ideas in their work. You can get popular books on how to apply Stoicism in your failing marriage. It's become a popular thing now. Yes. Okay, thank you. That's Stoicism. Any questions about that?
No, I picked it because Stoicism caught my eye.
Okay.
And we have an old saying, there was a stoic calm about the person.
Okay, so it's a phrase in Norwegian.
It's a phrase in Norwegian,
yeah. I think Norwegians are quite stoical people. You have to put up with, a lot, difficult weather, and
difficult neighbours, everything,
the whole works. But yeah. Okay, now we'll do ancient Egyptian. This is fascinating. Number 4. Well, this is really interesting. I got very deeply into ancient Egyptian when I first came back from Canada to live in London, and I used to spend a lot of all my waking hours in the British Museum Library. And I was determined to kind of study everything, understand everything, research everything, and then write a book about absolutely everything, which would solve the problems of the world and bring world peace. I'd already spent 4 years in Canada doing all that, but now I had all the resources of London. And in the British Museum Library, when you went up the stairs, there were all these ancient Egyptian relics. The British Museum has a huge number of Egyptian relics, mummies and pharaohs and Egyptian writings. And so I used to, on my way to the library for the day's reading, I would pass all these ancient Egyptian sages and their mummies and say, well, okay, I'm doing the work,
What are you doing here in UK?
And it was just, to die for, really. And I tried to learn a bit of ancient Egyptian, got dictionaries, and began a lifelong fascination with the Egyptian language, discovered that it's Hamito-Semitic, it's related to Hebrew and Arabic. So I realised it could be a key for healing the splits between Islamic and Jewish thinking. Discovered that both Islam and Judaism were partly inspired by ancient Egyptian thought. I was reading their sacred texts, ancient poems, which helped shape the Bible, what we call the Bible. It was really a Jewish borrowing of a lot of ancient Egyptian concepts, including monotheism. I was taught at school that the Jewish religion invented monotheism, and that's its great claim to fame. No, it's not true. The idea was Egyptian, that ultimately behind all the netters, which is their word for the gods, there is a divine unity, which can be called the divine intelligence, which manifests in all the gods and goddesses. But it's a unity, and that is the core idea of monotheism, which was an Egyptian discovery. There were more temples in Egypt per square mile than any other country in the world, either before or since. They were the most religious of all people in the whole of history. They were centres for healing, for learning. They were highly literate, so scribes would master the hieroglyphs and guard the scriptures, and they were pious, so they believed piety is the best way of showing faith. And by the way, going back to Aristotle, there's a brilliant line in the Ethics where he says that to live virtuously is the highest form of piety. He's on the ball there. So Egyptian religion, absolutely fascinating, but it was a philosophy as well. It had this belief in the netters. We know some of the early sages, Imhotep, And Hotep meant peace in Egyptian. Imhotep is who comes in peace. He was the architect of the first pyramids, and is a sage. We have his writings, they've come down to us. Unbelievably wise, thinker. And so the Egyptians wrote wisdom writings, advice to their children, to sort of philosophical text, just like Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics is dedicated to his son, Nicomachus. So we have Egyptian writings for the son of Imhotep or whoever. The gods are plural manifestations of the one divine energy, and they have different qualities. Ra, the sun god, is fiery, effulgent, the creator spirit. Osiris is the one who's prepared to sacrifice himself in death for righteousness, and he's the lord of the dead. When you die in Egypt, you go to judgment before Osiris. Thoth, who's my line manager, is the god of scribes, writing, scholars, philosophers. And he was also called Khonsu because he was seen as the moon god. And it said he was also called Yah or Yahweh. And I speculate in my Tarot of the Gods that maybe Moses, who was trained in Egypt, was trained in the school of Thoth, which figures he was literate. And that's where he got Yahweh from, who's actually, his real name is Thoth. Okay, very interesting. When the Greeks arrived in Egypt, and they loved Egypt, they all used to go there for pilgrimage. Herodotus went, founder of history. He spent ages in Egypt writing it up. But so did Plato, who spent ages studying there. So did Pythagoras, because they realised these guys are very wise. And they kind of traded with Egypt. There was a centre for Greek trade and so on. And they realised that Thoth is actually the same as Hermes. So they dedicated temples to Thoth Hermes in the classical period of Egyptian, sort of late civilization. And that's what gave us the Hermetic texts. And those have survived in Greek, but they are quintessential writings of what Egyptian philosophy was all about. And they are Neoplatonic Egyptian mystery traditions, which when I went to the Vatican Library, I discovered the best thumbed book in the entire Vatican Library was the Hermetic texts, which is interesting because they were rediscovered in the Renaissance period in Italy and in Florence, republished in Latin, and then all intellectuals throughout Europe, read them, including in Britain, John Dee, in France and elsewhere. I'm not sure when the Hermetic texts got to Norway, but I'm sure they did. Sometime probably in the 18th century. So some of the Freemasonic circles of Sweden were reading them, in Denmark. And Swedenborg and people like that knew about them. But anyway, so it's fascinating stuff. And then Ma'at, who's the goddess of absolute justice, she watches all our actions, and we get judged at death if we've been righteous and pursued virtue. And then Isis is the mother goddess. She's like the wife of Osiris, who is the feminine principle that brings Osiris back to life after he's killed by Set. So it's a huge... And I met an Irish priest who refounded the Fellowship of Isis, based in Ireland. And I'm initiated into the Fellowship of Isis as a priest, because to me all philosophers by definition are followers of Isis and the Egyptian wisdom, as Pythagoras was and as Plato was. And Apuleius, the Latin author, wrote the famous novel about Isis worship, The Golden Ass it's called. So, and of course Napoleon, now this is something that I've learned recently. Napoleon, when he went to Egypt, because he loved all things Egyptian too, he should have just gone as a pilgrim, but he took an army with him, because that was the way he worked. And they won a few battles, lost a few, but mainly they just set up a printing press and published a newspaper. And still to this day, there's a French cultural centre in Cairo, huge library and things. And he apparently spent a night in the Great Pyramid, alone, did old Napoleon. I've read this in Manly Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, but I've not seen it verified in another source. I'd love to see an esoteric biography of Napoleon, find out if it's true. But he certainly took with him hundreds of scientists, mathematicians, savants, who then brought the hieroglyphs in the Rosetta Stone, because the Rosetta Stone was found in Egypt at that time. The British managed to capture it, and it ended up coming back to London, to the British Museum, right? But copies had been made by Napoleon's staff, and it was Champollion, French Freemason and savant, who translated the hieroglyphs into French. So we can now actually read the texts for the first time for like 2,000 years. And Egyptology is a flourishing science in both Britain and France. So that's good. I wish the wisdom of that ancient civilization would shine forth again, you know, and bring peace. Because peace was the primary virtue for Egypt. I mean, they were warriors, they would fight, but that wasn't their preferred option. They preferred diplomacy and soft power, we would call it. Okay, so that's Egypt. Let's. Is that sufficient?
Yes,
Any questions?
Thank you very much.
You've not been to Egypt.
No.
Okay.
When my mother was pregnant, she went to Egypt. So
With you.
You've almost been in Egypt.
Okay, so you
I
were.
don't remember very well.
But you were there as a baby.
Yeah, maybe some vibrations like, I could.
I'm sure you were there. Yeah.
I've gone through the Suez Canal on a ship.
Oh, did you?
One of the first ships after they reopened the Suez Canal after the
war.
After the war, yeah.
So that'd be in like the 60s, late 60s.
Late 60s, early 70s, I think.
Yeah, my mother went through the Suez Canal in
Yeah.
the 30s on the way to India on a ship. She was a global traveller in the 1930s.
Was she posh? You know what the word.
She was an academic.
You know what the expression.
Oh, I
posh
see.
means?
Yes, port out, starve at home, or something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, she was she was a secretary. She'd done her degree at the University of London in the 30s, which was unusual for women, and then she went on a world walkabout to Australia and New Zealand and South Africa, and I've got photographs of all that.
70. It must have been 76.
When you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
After the Sinai War,
Yeah.
And it was all the devastation you could see on the buildings with the bullet holes and it.
The wars have been going on far too long.
Yeah.
between, and that's why I want a peace treaty between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. I mean, I will just add one thing about the Egyptian religion, which is that they took to. I'm sure Christ studied there as part of his work, and I've got academic sources that have worked that out. But I also think that the Gnostic traditions of Christianity were Egyptian origin. So there was a deep love of Gnosticism in ancient Egyptian Christianity. And that's why they found the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Thomas. They used to write these in Coptic. And Valentinus was from Egypt. So these were early Christian savants, sages, who were trying to reconcile pagan Egyptian wisdom with Christ's teachings. And, it's very interesting. When I was in the Vatican Library, there's a huge collection. They've got all these texts, and they're all beavering away trying to work out, the Gnostic roots of the conventional Gospels, like Matthew and so on. So, okay, I'm not going to do a table. I'm going to do one of the names of peace, because that's very exciting, and I'm going to do it at random. What do we get? Okay, we've got number 25. And the language is Quechua. So each of these projects in the book of 99 Names of Peace, A is a language and B a project. Quechua is the language of the Incan Empire in South America. Once dominated vast regions of South America, predated the Incan civilization, was spoken in a small area in the southern Peruvian highlands, And when the Spanish arrived, some of these sages, some of the kind of scholars that learned Quechua, some of the Quechuan priests, Incan priests, learned Spanish, and they could talk and study each other's cultures and systems. It's still spoken today by about 13% of Peruvians speak a Quechua language, so it's a living tradition. Some of the most important Incan historians and intellectuals accepted the wisdom that Christianity had to offer, but they said, yeah, but we've got our own wisdom, you know, and so they tried to work on a synthesis, which I've given here. They worship Mother Earth, Pachamama, who is the goddess of the earth. In the Incan civilization, they cultivated a lot of the food and vegetables that the world relies on, things like tomatoes, different forms of beans, avocados. Very brilliant agriculturalists, because they loved Pachamama. They worked out how nature works and how you can grow stuff. And they built, terraces, like at Machu Picchu, where it's unbelievable to think people lived and grew stuff, but they did. They also, in the Incan culture, used ayahuasca as a ritual intoxicant for shamanic voyaging, but only occasionally, not a sort of party trick. Only if you're serious and want to talk to the gods, you would go and see the shaman. They worship the sun god, Inti, who fertilizes the Mother Earth and is like the chief, of the deities. They had a system of writing made of knots using string. This was the indigenous writing system. They didn't use pens and paper. They used knots, which is extraordinary. There was a great Incan sage, Guaman Poma de Ayala, the most important Incan intellectual who learned Spanish, and who wrote a great work called El Prima Nueva Crónico y Buen Gobierno, the first new chronicle and good government book. Because he was an intellectual aristocrat in the Incan civilization who'd been at high levels of government. He was trying to teach the Spanish how to govern wisely, like not with rape and killing and butchery and shooting, but listening to your own religion. Try being better Christians, was his basic argument, and then we'll meet you in the higher realms. He wrote it and also sent it to the King of Spain, outlining the injustices of colonial rule. And he said, look, you Spanish are foreign settlers. It's our country because God has given it to us. And if you're going to stay here, you have to use the principles of good governance. And that's what this book is about, he said. So anyway, I give several words for peace in Quechua. One is Thac, which means a state of harmony characterized by a lack of violent conflict. There's another word, Joaquin, which, interestingly enough, is the kind of peace that arises from the act of giving or offering something. It involves generosity or sharing with others. This concept of sharing is essential to Quechua culture, still today. And there's one tribe in particular called the Quero, sometimes called the last living Incas, whose language is a descendant of, it's one of the dialects of Quechua. And they see life as an ecological balance in which all parts render service to the greater whole. And their shamans are teaching this. I have a dear friend, Kate Dineen, who lives in Stroud, in England, who's spent time living with the Quero people. She's a Druidess, but there's a similarity between the Druids and the Incans. And I give a lot more information in the book about other words in Quechua. Right, so Can I ask you, I'm having a coughing fit, can you read out the project? So the project, just read the first description of it.
You asked
In
me to
English.
read in English.
Yes, you're good at English.
Oh my God.
Go for it, yeah.
World Solar Energy Authority. In a world where carbon fuels and nuclear fuels both bring several environmental impacts, the long-term solution to our energy needs as a planet would seem to be to shift towards alternative energy sources, of which solar energy is one of the most important. The function of the World Solar Energy Authority will be to coordinate, organize, and empower all the countries of the world to adopt effective and creative solar energy programs, so that ordinary citizens can switch over to using solar power to generate their own energy needs and also to furnish surplus into the electricity grid of the country. It is intended that the World Solar Energy Authority will also function as part of the overall emerging world governance system, since ensuring international equitable access to energy is envisioned as part of its overall strategic responsibilities.
Thank you, that was very well read. So, so I've married this project with Quechua, the language, because obviously they worshipped Inti, the sun god. And, you know, I think as a planet, as I say here, we've got to sort out our long-term energy needs. And the sun is pumping out this infinite amount of energy, which we can draw on. I don't think it's the only answer. I'm not saying we should stop doing other sources, but I think we should be more intelligent about using solar. And therefore we need a kind of central coordinating system to organise and plan for that. And that's what the project is. I describe it, explain how it might work. And I mean, it's interesting, this World Governments meeting that just took place in Dubai, I mean, they ought to be talking about it there. Maybe they are, I don't know. I mean, the trouble is that's very much the heartland of the oil lobby.
Yeah.
It seems to me that oil will be around for a while, and that's, you know, one can't stop that immediately. But solar, and I think hydrogen fuel comes with solar, because if we can use solar energy to create hydrogen fuel, that can power the cars, the trains, the buses, etc. of the future.
I think hydrogen is a very good fuel,
Yeah.
and it won't disappear.
Well, no, I mean, it comes from water. I mean, it is the most common element in the universe. We are made of hydrogen.
Yeah, I think
And-
one of the reasons that it isn't really higher on the fuel system today is that the oil companies have had far too much money and far too much power, and sort of
Blocked it.
Blocked
yeah.
it.
Yeah, well, it's time to stop that, and this is part of this project. I noted, I don't know, it came up on my feed on Facebook that there's a brand new hydrogen-powered car appeared, which is like super fast. I think it's been made by Mercedes-Benz or something. It's a mainstream hydrogen car, which has huge travelling miles with just one tank, you know.
Yeah, the only pollution is water, clean water.
Yeah, water comes out of the exhaust. Yeah, so I think solar and hydrogen are the way to go, and I describe all that. There's people working on generating hydrogen from solar energy at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. A woman called Sophia Hausener. I think that's where Einstein worked or did his degrees. So yes, I think the Swiss can get this together, and we need their wisdom to crack the hydrogen solar.
There is also huge sources of natural hydrogen in the ground.
Yes,
So-called green hydrogen.
that's also becoming more obvious to people. We don't have to just generate it from water; it's already there underground.
Yep.
So I think, but you see, if we leave it to markets alone to organise, The trouble is they always do the right thing at the very end. The market is happy running oil, and because of the vast profits that people are rolling in. So I think this is where we need a world governance system. And my friend Glenn Martin, with his World Parliament Association, they're having a meeting in Pondicherry this year, in fact, in the French-speaking part of India, to discuss this at like a World Parliament meeting. And the UN should be doing more here. So anyway, those are also mentioned in other projects. Yeah.
Among the countries that could help on that topic, maybe China is interesting because it has no gas nor petrol, so it may be interested by alternative energy sources. And they have the industrial, I don't know how to say in English, in French we say filière, from extracting rough materials
Yeah.
to industrialized and producing solar panels or solar device to make the energy.
So they're making lots of solar
They
panels.
have all. So they could make it very easily.
Yeah.
And this is a powerful country, and I don't have the figures, but it seems that they are going. Of course, they need so much energy that they are using coal and so on, but they also go on solar and
Yeah.
other,
They're making that
water,
transition.
especially water, also driven energy.
Yes. So yes, China has to be part of this World Solar Energy Authority, along with Europe and the Americas and everyone else. It's a visionary project.
Africa as well.
Well, they have
There's a lot
huge
of-
amounts of sun.
There's a lot of
coming.
sun
Yeah.
in the subtropics,
Yes.
tropics.
Correct. So, yes, I think it's it will come. I just hope that we get there in time. Okay, let's move on to our tarot of the gods to finish, because we've talked about human reason. We talked about the gods. Let's see what they want to shower upon us in the way of divine guidance at this interesting time in world history. It's fascinating being born at this time, but it's slightly more bumpy than I thought. I thought we'd have world peace by now. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, you choose one. Okay, brilliant. Okay, and now you hold them out for Armel.
I take the first one.
That's easy.
Do you take one, Thomas?
Yeah, I will. Yes, please. Yes.
Which one do you want?
Hang on, let me choose. What I want. Right. Just get the old fire going. Ah. Right. Aha. Okay, let's have this baby here. Right, thank you. Oh, look. Yes.
Oh,
One of my favourites. He keeps popping up. Yeah. What have you got, Jan?
Yet.
I was going to say Inti would come in. Yeah. Well chosen, sir. So that is the Incan god of the sun.
Oh yeah.
So that's a divine affirmation. Thank you, Inti. We love you.
You see a lot of the countries in South America actually have sun in their national flag.
On their flag. And that is actually the sign of Inti, the Incan god of the sun. Who is, what number is it?
19.
Right. So, yeah.